Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Campus Debate Season 2. My name is Masi Vugutsa, your host for this round. I know with that energy that I started, you're wondering if this is a sports show that you've currently tuned into. Well, just so you know, it is a sport because us as debaters, we consider debating one of the most exhilarating sports that we've ever had to encounter. And with that, we get to have an amazing round tonight with Strathmore University speaking against St. Paul's University. It's going to be an intriguing round. Why? Because the debaters before us in this round have been able to survive through preliminary rounds, possible knockout rounds, and the second preliminaries for them to actively be within the quarterfinals. So you're guaranteed the best of the best that universities in Nairobi have to offer. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the speakers from side proposition represented by St. Paul's University. Then the speakers from side opposition represented by Strathmore University. I think this is a round of the S's, so I'll allow the speakers to introduce themselves and tell us something interesting or intriguing that they value within their lives. Proposition.
Hello everyone, I'm Gloria Bond from St. Paul's University and I am multifaceted.
Hello everyone, I'm Winsley Owaka from St. Paul's University. Out of speaking, I love guns. That is why I'm into ballistics. Thank you.
From side proposition, the first speaker is multifaceted, while the second speaker is into ballistics. I think that's a guarantee enough for an engaging debate, especially known by their ability to manipulate the English language for themselves. I don't know if you understand ballistics or what being multifaceted actually entails, but I think we'll get to hear from the gist of their speeches. We welcome side opposition to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Shamia Muchesia, and I think I've said something interesting, for the past 6 preliminary rounds. So I am a Liverpool fan, is what I shall stick to.
My name is Jeff Melita. For something interesting about myself, I don't know, so I'll just say what I do. I'm the founder and managing director at Ira Academy.
And from side opposition, we have the founder of Ayura Academy and the second speaker who has been as consistent in their interesting facts as they have been with Strathmore University winning their rounds. So with that, we welcome the amazing speakers for an engaging round going forward.
Hello, I'm Winnie Sydney Ombewa. Yeah, all the best.
Thank you, Marcy. Something interesting for the day. It's quarterfinals. Just don't take it very seriously. I'm expecting a very, very interesting round. We should see why MPs should get salaries or not. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Osenyi Lucy. Something interesting about myself is I'm a lover of art, right from speaking to art itself, the painting, and I'm writing a kid's book because I love kids. Yeah.
From the amazing judging pool that we have, one of them is a lover of art and at the same time a writer of a kid's book, and I think that's the cutest thing ever. For the second judge, he tells us that he wants to have an interesting debate, but at the same time tells the speakers not to take it very seriously. I don't know if the two can coexist, but we'll get to see with the round. And from the final judge, the most interesting thing about this debate is that she wants to wish all the speakers the very best in the quarterfinals round. I think with that, you're tired of listening to us speak. You're very eager to find out what the motion for this round is. So, for St. Paul's University and Strathmore University, the motion for this round reads, this House believes that members of Parliament should be paid on commission as opposed to a high basic salary. Those who don't work should earn less in the given months. I'll repeat that. This House believes that members of Parliament should be paid on commission as opposed to a high basic salary. Those who don't work should earn less in the given months. Understanding that we are all advocating for our area MPs to work as hard as they can to be able to receive the same commensurate for the money that they're earning at the end of the month. Do you believe in this motion or do you not? Without further ado, we welcome the first speaker proposition to give us their arguments. Hear, hear.
As you've heard the motion, it reads that this House believes that members of Parliament should be paid on commission as opposed to basic salary, and those who don't work should earn less in the given month. This motion suggests a shift from the current basic salary for MPs, which typically involves a high, let's emphasize on the high, and if you'd ask me, being paid around 700K a month for doing nothing, just sitting and existing in your office, it's really absurd, and to a performance-based pay salary. So who are members of Parliament, to our lovely viewers? These are elected and nominated representatives who serve in the legislative body of our country. And in Kenya, members of Parliament are members of the National Assembly, responsible for lawmaking, representing constituents and overseeing the government. If you don't understand what paid on commission means, it said that this is a payment system where earnings are directly linked to performance or results. Instead of receiving fixed salary, MPs would earn money based on their productivity, legislative contributions, constituency work, and other measurable activities. And what is a basic salary? This is the substantial fixed amount of money paid regularly to MPs, regardless of their performance or contributions. And this is the status quo. This is what they believe in their world. And we're here to tell you that we actually believe that it is wrong. In our world, we believe that you are supposed to earn based on your work, what you're able to do, what you're able to bring into the table. And for the believers, we know that if you do not work, then you are not allowed to eat. So in our world, we champion for incentivized productivity, where members of the Parliament will be motivated to go to work, knowing that their monthly salary depend on it, that there is luxurious trips that and all these luxurious things that they enjoy from the government is actually dependent on whatever they are able to do in that month. And on accountability and participation and transparency, we believe that all reports and rankings of MPs on a monthly basis should be open to the public through existing platforms such as like the government websites and apps, for instance, e-citizens, so that the people can openly see how their representatives are doing. And in need of a change, they can actually act on it from perspective of fact. So like, if I know that my area MP is not doing whatever he's supposed to do, it won't be based on like just assumptions. It will be based on fact. I'll log into the e-citizen platform and see the ranking of that month or the previous month and see like, oh, so my member of Parliament is actually lagging behind out of the 290 staff. He's to something at the bottom, and then we actually, as the youth, and because we need the change, I'll be able to like mobilize my fellow youth and my fellow change makers to go and call him out of office, and then we get someone who is fit for the office. And we believe that my partner will check that. I believe that we encourage cost effectiveness. Taxpayers' money would be better spent. Instead of paying a high fixed salary regardless of performance, funds would be allocated based on the tangible work of MPs' performance and ensuring use of better public resources. The problem is not that actually the government does not have money, it's only that they have a misplaced sense of responsibility and their priorities are wrong, instead of actually just focusing on how they can use the little that they have, and if they need to cut costs, if they need to be more proactive on how they are incentivizing all their workers, then that's what we are here for. And we believe that there'll be increased responsiveness. MPs would be incentivized to be more responsive to their constituents' needs and more active in their constituencies as their pay would reflect their engagement and effectiveness. And we think this is a good thing because the citizens would be okay. They'll benefit from the diligent work of the MP, and the MP will be okay because they'll earn based on their performance, and also and the entire nation will be okay. We'll have better education, we'll have better infrastructure, we'll have better healthcare, and we believe that we'll have reduced rate of of inconveniences because people are able to be held accountable. And for instance, in the recent scenarios in Kenya where the MPs were to vote for the finance bill, either yes or no, we had examples of MPs who said that they'd actually just voted yes because they're answerable to the president, and actually not remembering that they are answerable to the people who represent them. So they're supposed to go there and work for the people and represent their voices and do their due diligence. And we believe that in our world, these members of parliament, they'll be answerable to their real employers, who are the people who voted them in, and not just doing the blind loyalty thing. And also believe that the constituency engagement would improve. They'll monitor MPs' presence in their constituencies through constituency offices and local administrative offices, instead of them cooking up the CDF reports that they usually do and cover up some cases of corruption. They'll be able to. We'll come up with a system and the body that will be able to follow up on where the money has been allocated, confirm if those schools receive that kind of money that has been stated there. And we believe that our world is better than theirs because our system encourages meritocracy and incentivizes productivity. Thank you.
From side proposition, they argue meritocracy increases productivity, and because of this, accountability is something they're after that can only be achieved when you pay MPs on commission. Now we welcome the first speaker opposition to give us their substantive. Hear, hear.
It seems that the proposition side forgets the MPs that they're actually dealing with, because one of the major questions that's being posited to the state lawmakers, the sword and shield of the Republic, of the citizens of the Republic of Kenya, is how do you tear gas a body? Simply, panel, what we are trying to tell you here, two things. Firstly, human beings are intrinsically selfish, meaning they prioritize self-interest over protection of other individuals' interests and values. You at home, you're selfish. And this selfishness extends to beyond these individual people and even extends those lawmakers, because we have a situation where press conferences are being held over the destruction of property, where individuals are not conscious and are not comfortable with mentioning the lives that were lost within these kind of setups. But even secondly, proposition is very ignorant of the fact of what exactly the political climate exists within this kind of Republic of Kenya. Notice two things, panel. Firstly, MPs are just political actors, just like any actors within the administrative system, driven by perverse incentives that govern the political elite. They're targeted and wired to do three things. They're wired to defraud, they're optics-driven, meaning they prioritize popularity over necessity, but even thirdly and most importantly, they're very unconscious of the public whose very interest they're elected to serve. Notice the burden on them was simple and they failed to execute it. Show us why this is an effective solution, but even more than that, right? Whether they have exhausted all viable alternatives actually resulting to this particular choice. The argument from opposition side is very simple. This alternative that they proffer creates a worse outcome for the very people that these MPs are elected to protect. The thought process for you viewers at home is very simple. It shifts the logic of introduction of commissions, shifts the focus away from public output to individual gain that these MPs are likely to be susceptible to harm, to use to harm these very public citizens of the Republic that they're meant to protect and serve. This is through three ways. Firstly, there's the risk of short-termism that is then introduced on their side. This is simply because of the incentive to prioritize short-term gains over long-term national interest being driven purely by that commission acquisition incentive. Notice then that the MPs are likely to focus on projects that provide immediate results. Case in point being Nairobi County's, kind of prioritization metric, where you're having systems in place to focus probably on more optic-driven projects than what the actual people would want. Things such as better infrastructure in terms of roads, things such as better sanitation projects, among other things, who will leave the county government to listen to the people and understand what they want. But even secondly, panel, their world increases the capacity for corruption. We've already shown you that there's a probability for these people to defraud. When given an opportunity to steal, they will steal, and they will steal mercilessly. You, Ramon, they will steal from you. Lucy, they have already stolen from you. That's probably why you're here. Notice then that these individuals are more susceptible then to lobbying and undue influence influence from special interest groups. She's mentioned here that these people voted yes, despite all people telling them that we don't want this bill. This is simply because of probably the assumption that there was some likely undue influence that was placed on them. The resultant effect that is present here is very simple. We result in a system that undermines the integrity of the legislative process and therefore eroding the already little public trust in democratic institutions. But even thirdly and most importantly then, panel, we have a focus on quantity over quality of legislation. Notice then that a commission-based model is likely to do two things. Encourage these MPs to prioritize quantity of legislation output rather than the actual quality of legislation that is present there. This is simply due to the incentive to generate more and more income due to that commission-based model. They're likely to lead to proliferation of poorly thought out policies, poorly thought out legislations, simply because they're in a rush to meet the next targets that are present there because they know that their commission is contingent on how much they're able to show people they've been able to achieve. But even more importantly than panel, the resultant impact becomes this, and that is the reason these guys are going home. Their system creates undermining the public service ethos in and of themselves, simply because MPs panel are meant to be public servants whose primary and only motivation ought to be representing the will of their constituents. You, Sydney, your MP should be speaking for you, should be talking about what you want, should be talking about what you value. The system that they're creating shifts the priority and the focus to personal gain, which deprioritizes the quality of governance overall. The net resultant effect is this, panel, and this is why we win this particular debate. The world is likely to lead to the generation of irreparable harm simply because of the concept of intergenerational justice. What is an MP most likely to do, panel, when they have this commission-based model? They're likely to want to show that they've achieved their targets. They're likely to want to show that they've done big long-termistic projects, things that are going to cause them to be re-elected once again. They're likely then to take something like a loan that is likely to disadvantage Kiragu at home, probably, who is interested in the protection of his benefit, who is interested in probably just getting a road to go to school, who's probably just interested in having access to business opportunities. This kind of system will give the lawmakers unfettered, unchecked access to having the capacity to be able to defraud, disenfranchise, and harm all citizens of the Republic of Kenya. Opposition.
I think that has been an amazing round from both proposition and opposition, with opposition arguing that the whole idea of having a commission-based compensation for area MPs is going to be far much worse considering the legislative capacities that MPs play in the state that we are currently residing within. I don't know if you think your area MP needs to be paid on commission or not. Based off of the arguments that you've gotten from the first half, feel free to engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, and we'll see you after a short break with a continuation of arguments from both teams. Thank you so much for choosing to remain with us for the second half of the debate, where we're going to have the speeches from the second speakers of each team. What has happened in the first half of the debate? Side proposition argues that the whole idea of having a commission based for MPs in regards to payment is going to be efficient for accountability purposes and for the whole idea of MPs actively doing work for their regions, and it's going to create even more capacity for people to hold their area MPs accountable or even recall them at a point in time where they're not doing the work they're supposed to. From side opposition, however, they argue that the nature of politicians is they will always be self-interested, which means then, since they are going to be actively making laws and because they are part of legislative processes, what incentive then exists for MPs to actively prefer commission-based payment compared to salaries? But even so, what metrics exist to actively have MPs do work without taking out debt or things like that that would harm the people they're actively meant to protect? I don't know if that's enough recap for you, but I think the second speakers can do a better job. With that, we welcome the second speaker proposition to continue the argument. Here.
Before I begin, I'm baffled that the oppositions do clearly tell the citizens that they are selfish and they are just motivated by money, rather than being motivated to perform for reasons as to why they were elected. Let me begin by Booker Washington words, in which he did say that nothing ever comes to one that is worth having except as a result of serious hard work. In our world, I do believe that it is a world that is going to cater for everything. The metrics that we have in place to ensure that MPs will be fully paid on commission, and this will be achieved. First of all, in our world, there is an independent performance evaluation commission that will ensure that all these issues and works that the MPs do perform are at least taken care of and are watched keenly. There also will be audits that will help us to see and clarify on how one has performed, so that at least there will be balance in that everybody will be convinced that so and so has performed, and this is what he should earn according to what is performed. Why I still believe that our world is the best world. In every government, what people fight for is democracy. How will we achieve democracy in a world where people serve the politicians or try to do duties to please the godfathers, the party leaders that elected them? But in our world, you see, we ensure that you earn and at least you are tasked to work for the people who elected you, in that people will feel free that at least our wills and our demands are adhered to. Secondly, in our world, we try to advocate for equality. In their world, they collect money, go buy expensive belts. You find that an MP is wearing a watch that is worth 3.2 million, but your constituents, people lack even water. People cannot acquire basic education. But in our world, being paid through commission, you'll find that when you work less, you will earn less. Meaning, it will force you that you have to at least work for the people so that you also benefit as they benefit. Not that in their world you find MPs don't deliver, they have luxuries, but the people who are here don't benefit. In our world, if the MP fails to perform, you also don't earn. Again, in our world, how we are going to ensure that all of these and how it is going to benefit us, we are going to find that there is going to be increased productivity, because payment done through commission will make responsive, the MPs will try to be responsible and also attend to roles that are allocated to them. Again, in our world, there is going to be cost effective to the entire government, because once we've realized that you are not performing and you are weak, there is no need of paying you much, because the money that is being deducted can be tapped to be used in other sectors that can develop, rather than in their world where you don't perform but you earn, and this still affects the citizens because the tax will increase. But in our world, the amount that you have not worked for, it will be used to serve other fields. This will relieve the government, and also the citizens too will enjoy. Just as she did clearly indicate, in our world, at least transparency is a bit achieved. Though we cannot end corruption, but at least there will be transparency, because in the current situation, most MPs go to parliament, then they register through biometrics and leave without giving or discussing motions. But in our world, because there are going to be electric apps, online apps that will ensure that once your MP signs in that he is attended, you will watch his progress throughout, and you will ensure that at least he is performing, or even the payment that is set for him is correctly. He deserves that, because at least you have been watching, rather than in their world where you find most MPs log in, they don't attend to sessions, and at long last they tend to earn things that they have not worked for. Again, in our world, there is going to be active public participation, because the public will be motivated. They will know that we have to be at keen watch to ensure that he has performed, because to enable him to earn. This will motivate them. We at least have to task and keep our MPs on watch to ensure what have they delivered and what will they earn. And this also will kind of try to motivate MPs to ensure that they work, because everybody is always working to earn something at the end, because the MPs will know that if I don't work, I will lose, and this will motivate them to work. Once they work, just as my colleague has said, there will be increased development in infrastructure. Again, the government will also get ease in that there will be increased employment. Once infrastructures are there, there will be employment. This will increase in issues such as taxes. And also in our world, just as I have said, there will be public trust, because people will believe that these people whom we've elected to parliament, they are not there to serve their kingpins. They are not there to serve parties that they are allied to, but they are there to at least serve as the people who elected them. By giving all those, I believe that we are winning this motion. Thank you.
If you work less, you earn less. And at the same time, proposition argues that transparency and accountability build the possibility of development and redistribution of funds as well as employment. I don't know what opposition has to say about that, but with that, we welcome the second speaker, opposition, to engage. Hear, hear.
Chair, the most pressing human instinct is the idea that you need to survive beyond today. When you take something which, threatens the, survivability of human beings, they are likely to do everything which is good and bad in general, depending on which is easier, just to prove that they can be able to have an assured survival and be able to see tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to do something simple. No fancy introductions, but I'm going to ask one question, which is on behavioral economics. What happens when you tell someone that the only way they get paid is that they have to prove that they are doing more work, or the perception they have to give you is that they need to show you that they are doing more work? I believe that it's going to be very, very detrimental. I'm not going to engage with most of the things they say, because most of their impacts are contingent on them proving that they actually achieve it as they want it, that the impacts are going to materialize as they say. I'm going to prove why the impacts don't materialize in that regard. But beyond that, they try something which is very fishy, which is to give you other alternatives. Oh, we'll have audits. Oh, we'll have an independent commission's logic. If that can work, why must we go to their step? We can as well just do all those things before going into what they are saying. These guys are definitely out. But what's the reaction you're likely to get? The reaction would be to do everything possible to make sure that the citizens think that you're working. This means that MPs have the incentive to make people think that they are working, or else look for an alternative means of sustenance. What you are doing in this regard is that you're selling the perception. Even if you're not working, you need to sell that perception that you're working in and of itself. And I think the most intuitive thing here is look at how salesmen and women work. Their dependency on commissions means that they have to do everything, whether it's good or bad, whether they have to breach your own privacy, whether they have to badger you, just so that they can look like they are working to their bosses and that sort of thing. This is likely to happen on their side of the house. What it's likely to mean is 4 impacts within today's debate. A, it would mean MPs prioritize quantity above quality work in and of itself, because quality work is something which takes so much time. You're unlikely to get paid because it takes so much time. You cannot be able to prove that this month you've worked. Why are you building a road which is 1 year and you expect to be paid this month? We think it's particularly difficult, and we think that's actively worse. But what it's also likely to look like is that these individuals are likely to invest their resources in many unnecessary things like hiring like an infinite number of tractors, just so that they can be able to look like they're having, some work done and that sort of thing. We think this is actively bad. Why is this likely to happen the way we say it's going to happen? It is much more difficult to pursue quality because A, it takes so much time, but 2, it requires so much supervision. So you're likely to go for the easier solution, which is massively spending resources on things like tractors everywhere, so that people can be able to buy the perception that you're actively working. Who is this true especially for? We think this is true for especially like literally any MP who wants to survive. We think lazy MPs as well, and MPs whose projects are likely to stall. Because notice, like, projects are very, very volatile and they're subject to so many things. These guys need to defend why. If COVID-19 strikes today and your project as an MP is something which is not finished, why should you justifiably be punished as a result of something which is beyond the factors that you can be able to control within your life? But second thing here, we think MPs will be more afraid of, just long-term projects, as Jeff tells you. Why is this the case? A, it would mean it takes more time before you get paid. But secondly, it would mean there is a higher likelihood that your project can experience a breakdown due to the long-term volatility. Like, anything could happen between now and when your project is completed. What it then means is that most MPs are likely to run for short-term projects, building a kiosk above, building things like bridges, building things like roads, and we think that's actively bad. But the third thing is the likelihood for more corruption in this instance. What happens when you realize that tomorrow there's a potential that you could be hungry? What it then means is that it encourages you to spend more on internally defending your resources and accruing more resources, because tomorrow you could as well starve and that sort of thing. Why is this true, and why is this likely to happen the way we say it's going to happen, not how these guys say it's going to happen? Two reasons. A, because you literally want to eat as an MP, you want to sustain yourself beyond today, and therefore you are likely to want to accumulate as much resources, because tomorrow you don't know what's going to happen to that project that you've invested to. But secondly, just simply because investments and these projects in and of themselves could be able to burn and fail and not be successful, which means that even if you invest in and of itself, it's unlikely that you're sure that you're going to eat and that sort of thing. What it means is that these MPs have every incentive to fix prices, fix deals with other individuals so that you can be able to get your share, because you're unlikely to know what's going to happen tomorrow. What it then means is that these guys are largely unlikely to achieve most of those impacts they say, because to the extent where you buy into a case where there's more corruption, all those things they talk to you about, accountability, transparency, are unlikely to happen on their side of the house. But the fourth thing here is the likelihood of taking more loans, and this is something which is very dangerous. For you to eat as an MP, you need to be able to prove that you're working. This necessarily means that even if you have little budget, you need to be able to work beyond that and be able to, just find a way to prove to other individuals that you're working. What this is likely to look like is that you're likely to take more loans and more debts, and this is something which is actively worse. Why is this necessarily true? A, it is true because in the system we live in as a country, there's so much wealth and income distribution inequality which exists. So, for example, different citizens who exist at more remote areas can't be able to give the same amount of tax, which means less revenue for governments which exist within those regions, governments like Turkana, Marsabit, which means inherently they have less revenue than other individuals in Nairobi and that sort of thing. But secondly, we think budget allocation in itself is unequal in many areas. Other counties are given little money and that sort of thing. What it then means is that there's going to be an inherent clamor to take more loans, and we think this is actively worse. What is the weighing for this? Three mechanisms here. A, we think their mechanism on efficiency does not work. Why is this the case? At best, MPs push more towards spending taxpayers' money on creating their impression. Not that they are working, but creating that impression that they are working. Secondly, it's more sustainable because they have to take loans on their side so that you can continuously get paid and that sort of thing. Thirdly, we think it's unequal punishment which occurs in this instance, to the extent where what happens when you actively invested in a project but it necessarily fails, or you are given little budget so you can't necessarily have money. We think it leads to unfair punishment to these individuals. Never been prouder from opposition. Yeah, thank you.
According to side opposition, self-preservation is the greatest harm that has always existed within society. Everyone wants to preserve themselves and to ensure they get the maximum level of benefit that they can at that particular instance, which means they'll do anything and everything to make sure they earn the highest level of commission, even if it takes duping you as citizens. And I think up until this point, we've been duped enough by government officials in and of themselves with different projects that they claim to have. So do you think paying them on commission would exacerbate this whole idea of duping citizens? Or do you think, according to SAD proposition, it's a more efficient model to have accountability and transparency when it comes to MPs? We'll be going on a short commercial break, and once we come back, we'll get to hear from the judges whether Strathmore University or St. Paul's University was able to convince them on either side. Officially the third section of this amazing debate from St. Paul's University and Strathmore University, arguing whether we need to actively compensate MPs with commission in regards to their payment rather than the usual salaries that they receive. From side proposition, they tell you that there are already mechanisms that could actively offer the best level of solvency for these MPs to determine whether they are working or not. They tell you we can establish auditing sections and at the same time measures to actively hold these members of parliament accountable for their actions. And because of this, Commission will now incentivize them to work harder or work better for the benefit of the people at large. They also argue that the redistribution of funds that would exist from the MPs that don't get to work as hard as they ought to work, which means they get a lower commission, would ideally be received by or like redistributed to other projects that could exist within society. So development for them is a guarantee when we pay MPs on commission. For side opposition, however, they argue that the whole idea of development is actually going to be limited based off of the fact that long-term projects are not going to be taken in by MPs because they want to receive money now to amass as much money as they can for themselves for sustainability and self-preservation. The argument then becomes which team best offers the level of development for societies as per the arguments that they have offered. I think the judges equally have the same contemplation as I do, and because of this, they have asked to ask a question to both teams to determine their arguments further. I welcome the judges to ask their questions.
To side proposition, we've already seen in the society millionaires and billionaires chasing after these seats. It then tells you that money is not the incentive. It is the power, it is the privileges that come with being an MP. So in such a scenario, how are you going to constantly to hold an MP that is constantly not performing?
To the opposition side, reports have shown that there are MPs who have failed to deliver consistently. In our world, how then do you hold them accountable?
The questions to both teams is simple. For side opposition, how do you hold area MPs accountable at a point in time where they are not working? And for side proposition, the question is, majority of the people that get into politics already have the financial capacity to sustain themselves. So these commissions are not an incentive for them to work. How then do we guarantee development or quality projects existing for side proposition? We welcome the speakers, giving them 1 minute each to respond to the questions. Here.
In any scenario or instance that will come to realize that at least an MP is not performing as required, we'll just have to adhere to constitutional rights or rules, because we can recall an MP and at least come in with one who will at least perform accordingly, or who at least in a way has showed, because there are people who perform to the society, but they haven't at least taken chance to vie for this position. We can give them a chance to at least continue with the work that they have been doing to us. Thank you.
All right, so I do not have an answer to what you said, but guess who does? They do. They mentioned the alternatives which exist within status quo. Things like how you could publish detailed reports and audits which enable people to know the actual situation on the ground when they are voting. 2, they could have independent commissions which then do these audits and those sorts of things. 3, you could strengthen the people's rights, things like right to recall their leaders and that sort of thing. So we actively have options. These guys make a principal concession when they tell it to you, which means, again, you can't give them the case, because despite their beautiful impacts, they don't prove to you how their impacts necessarily materialize, how they want them to materialize. There's no mechanization, only basic principles as to how, accountability, transparency. They also shoot themselves in the foot because they're able to prove why MPs are necessarily bad actors. If they are bad actors, it's counterintuitive to see without any mechanization how those impacts on their side necessarily accrue. At least you can believe us. We tell you we will have more loans. We tell you they'll prioritize quantity over quality. We tell you about short-termism. We tell you about the increased corruption which happens necessarily on their side. This debate definitely goes to opposition.
Apparently, side proposition and opposition agree on a few things. The whole idea of auditing and holding area MPs accountable can exist on both fronts. I just wonder which model is the most efficient model to actively hold your area MP accountable for the actions that they choose. With that, I will welcome the judges to let us know what their feedback is, and at the same time, who gets to move on to the semi-finals and who doesn't.
It was an interesting round. Something that I love about even the concept of campus debates is that we center discourse around what's the best course of action, even in the existing current affairs, evaluate what's best for our people. And both sides were able to engage that, give their perspective on the same. Let's have a quick rundown of both teams, then the outcome. Government side of proposition talk about how their model would sort of bring about meritocracy, which translates into accountability, and the trickle-down effect is that it helps people inherently. Opposition talk about the idea that if you take that stance, it will lead to a worse outcome of people, right? They paint to you an image of what political elites look like. They analyze for you the incentives of these particular people. They give you mechanisms that what is gonna likely happen if you prioritize things like quantity over quality, which backs just the incentives that these political incentives have so seek to propagate, right? Now to the core. It was unanimous that we gave it to side opposition. So Strathmore are proceeding to the next round. Now, the justification. I think government is living in or proposition is living in an ideal world, right? They talk about their impacts, but they don't prove how they get to accrue. Their impacts are contingent on efficiency of their system, right? And that's how they engage with them. They talk to you about how much of beautiful impacts that we want for our country, but the thing is, you don't show us how we are going to get there, and we think that is a huge flaw in your case. Secondly, a lot of what they talk about goes unchallenged, right? They tell you how people are actually going to act in that particular way, and you don't give any response to this. You don't try and engage with their case, which I felt like was a huge disservice, and we expected a bit more from that, right? So that was the call from us, and yeah, wonderful debate, guys.
You have heard from the panel themselves. The motion this House believes that members of Parliament should be paid on commission as opposed to a high basic salary. Those who don't work should earn less in the given months, has been won by side opposition, the team from Strathmore University, who have been able to actively tell us that for this commission-based system to work, you're going to prioritize quantity over quality, you're going to be duped more by your area MPs, and furthermore, there's no level of efficiency that would even exist at a point in time where alternatives have not been existed. With that, we will get to see Strathmore University at the semi-finals rounds. For St. Paul's University, on the other hand, despite being able to have principled arguments and at the same time very engaging arguments from their side, they might not be able to move on to the next rounds based off of the fact that they just lost this round. However, I think their amazing speeches and capacities as debaters will qualify them to participate in the next season of campus debates, hopefully, and at the same time, we might possibly see them when we get to come together as debaters from this show. As we summarize the debate and we get to call it a night, I think it's important for us to understand the whole idea of having MPs be paid on commission rather than high-based salary is based off of the fact that we want to understand what incentives are there for MPs to actively work in the spaces that they hold. Do we think they're incentivized by money, or do we think that the people can actively hold them accountable by limiting their exposure to salaries and by actively giving them commission? I don't know what you think in regards to this motion. For everyone who understands economics, everyone who understands politics more than we possibly could, feel free to engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, and let us know what your view is and what your expert opinion on this issue could possibly be. That's it for tonight. My name is Masi Vugutsa, your host, Campus Debates. See you next week on Monday, same time, same place. Possibly a different team, but at the same time, an engaging debate. Here, here.